spending. If she was down, she went to spending spree. If she was up, manic side, do everything with spending, just go out. But then his comment to me was, my young daughter is not going to be able to go on a dance trip that we had promised her she could have because of this. We've had to turn everything over, and his daughter was 9 years old. And it was a multi-$1,000, multi-day trip off to some kind of exotic something. I looked at him across the table and I said, now when are you going to kind of come aware of your contribution in all this? I've heard about your wife and your daughter, but you're complicitous in this whole thing. And I said, and if you're worried about your 9-year-old, she will survive not being able to go on the dance trip. And as broken as she will be about it. Now, of course, you probably suspect she did go on the trip, and because she did, and you see, because he would not come clean with his own lack of self-management here by blaming everybody else on the deal. And I respect the fact that he was trying to, make the best out of a terrible situation. But until you pony up for your part of this, you don't manage well. And so what are those tapes that are played? See, in his mind, money was reward, and he needed to reward his daughter. So those storylines become important. Boundaries. Boundaries are something that are huge for us to pay attention to. Psychological boundaries, emotional boundaries. If you've not read Cloud and Townsend, I'm surely you have by now, and but I shouldn't say that. Maybe you've not heard of that book. Boundaries is the name of the book by Cloud and Townsend, and it's another good way to take my books back and get money and do something good with it. And buy Boundaries for yourself and read it. And it will really be a thought-provoking, kind of a challenging journey for you to realize that some of us have issues in our life because we're too compliant. We let other people come in and play with our toys, and they don't respect the fence around our yard. The emotional fence, the psychological fence. In fact, some of you maybe don't even realize that it's okay to have boundaries. That there's a part where you end and the rest of the world picks up. And it's okay to close the gate and tell the kids in the neighborhood, go play with your own toys for a while. I need to kind of have some. So finding it hard, you find it hard to say no to people, even when they make unhealthy requests of you or ask you to do things. You marvel that other people can say no to invitations or whatever. You feel so compelled to try to make everyone happy. One of your key phrases is, I just don't want to hurt their feelings. And you use that to make decisions. So now look what you've done. Not only are you trying to manage your own feelings, you've taken on the world of feelings to manage. It's got to be a tough thing to do, really. You got to be pretty tired. And so compliant, being too compliant is a way that can really kind of open you up to some psychological stress that you probably want to avoid. Or being, in the clutches of a controller. That's another boundary issue, for instance. They're controlling people you may have noticed in your life. Not you, I'm just thinking about others. And it's interesting because you are generally pretty wary of the aggressive, over-the-top controllers, because they're just kind of like, they announce themselves. I mean, they're like bull elephants coming raging through so you kind of learn over time to get out of their way. It's the passive controllers that are the real killers, because, they just come along and they just get, I learned when I was a seminary student, we didn't have online learning then because we didn't have online. We didn't know what that online meant, that you had hung something out to dry, I guess. It was about the closest thing to online we had. But when I was a seminary student back in the dark ages, I learned to worm fish in East Texas, and the tanks out there. They called them tanks. I called them ponds in the southeast where I grew up. When I moved there, people were talking about all these tanks they had on their property. I thought they were armed to the teeth. They just meant, these water, whatever. So I'm out there in pond, tank, water thingies, and there's fish on them. and there's bass, and they're on the bottom of the lake. Well, there are a lot of, and you learn, if you worm fish, you learn to to cast out there and let the worm sink till you feel it hit the bottom, quits taking line. You roll it up just a little bit above the bottom. You just kind of crank it into place, and then you just sit there and you wait. Now what happens is the fish comes along and he sees that worm, and you can feel it. You finally learn how to watch your line and how to feel it if you've got a real light rod that can feel the vibration. You can feel the fish playing with that worm. And you can learn to feel the fish swallow that worm, and you can see it when he really tastes it because that rod tip goes down, and that's when you set the hook, and that is a great feeling. You set the hook and you start reeling that fish in. Now, the image is, you see, people that are passive controllers have a bait that they dangle. Kind of like that worm that I put there in front of that fish who's just going about his business, and suddenly he's going somewhere he wasn't planning. Now, you just going along about your business, and these passive controllers just hang that bait out there. Now, you know what their favorite bait is? It's guilt. Because they guilt you into doing stuff. You know, I tell leaders all the time, watch out for those people who say, well, you know, our last pastor, you know, or, you know, I know you don't have time for someone like me, you know, and your answer is, of course not. You're right, come to think of it, or something. I mean, but what happens is, you're just going on, and they hook here, and you're suddenly going somewhere that you don't want. It ain't very pretty either, was it? And could you zone in, get a real close-up of that? No, I'm teasing. Just go back on your smoke break. So, so you're just kind of dialing, and you're suddenly going somewhere you didn't want to go. By the way, I had some of those bass apparently been around for a while, because some of them, right as you got to the top of the water, they could spit that hook out. They knew just exactly the right way to do that. And I can tell you can learn to spit the hook out even if you get hooked. Even if you wind up, you're headed someplace you don't want to go, you can learn to get rid of that. And so those boundary people, controllers, and all of those issues, you've got to figure out what those are to help manage in your world. Also, our bodies. Now, you looking at me, you would expect me to bring this up as a picture of health. You know, my 3 hours in the gym this morning before I came here. Maybe not. But what I want to talk about, and so guess what? If I were you, I would eat well and exercise. That's all I want to say about that. But there's something that I want to talk about that maybe you don't hear a lot, and that's how you maintenance the most important organ in your body, and that's your brain. Because when there are things that you do with your body that impact your brain and vice versa. Like, for instance, sleep deficit is an enormous challenge for people in our culture. It's an increasing challenge for people in our culture. And I work with a lot of leaders whose vision and judgment and emotional stability, vitality is all caught up in a lot of sleep deprivation. So your bodies need sleep. We don't even know exactly yet why they go to sleep, or how, I should say. We know why. The body repairs itself during sleep and all that. And your brain does work during sleep that it cannot do repair work, and that it cannot do at other points of time. We're beginning to learn more and more about this. But I'll tell you, there's something that's also very damaging to your brains and very challenging to your brains, and that's negative emotions. And I can tell you that negativity especially usually comes wrapped in a package of a person or people, and you have got to learn as a person how to guard yourself against negativity. Now, I know there are people we don't like for whatever reason. That's not the negative. It's negative thoughts. It's negative storylines. It's negative energy that I'm talking about. And quite honestly, I find that there are people that I really like. I enjoy being around them. I have fun with them, whatever reason. Their personality or whatever is intriguing. But I find that when I spend 20 or 30 minutes with them, I'm just exhausted emotionally. Somehow, we've talked about everybody in a spirit of prayer, of course, or we've run down, or they've talked about how bad everything is, and I just feel like I can't win. There's nothing we do that matters, and all that stuff. So, guarding yourself against that kind of negativity is a very important thing for you to do. Now, how much time have I got? 2 minutes. Piece of cake. Excuse me. You probably felt that at home. So pay attention to looking at your brains here along with your bodies. You also have to manage your expectations. These are self-expectations, because I know a lot of people who expect so much. If that perfectionism, dark side thing bothers you, then you're going to expect so much of yourself you're paralyzed. But also managing other people's expectations. For leaders especially, those of you who are taking this course, you're going to over time, you're going to teach the people around you what to expect out of you, good or bad or whatever else. So you're building that culture of expectation. So just pay attention to what, and by the way, can I even suggest that there are some people that you want to mess with their expectations, in the sense of you're trying to get them discontented, especially if you're a leader trying to initiate some change, like let's take this culture in a more missional direction. You might in fact want to make sure that the right people get unhappy about status quo or the way things are, so that it creates an expectation that we need to be doing something differently here. So there's a whole bevy of issues around dealing with these expectations in your life and in other people's lives. These are just some examples of what I mean by self-management. Everybody, the bad news is we all have stuff. I'd say bad news. The good news is we're privileged to manage stuff. I guess the challenging news is that we each have our own brand of these management pieces because of our wiring, because of our experiences and situations. So it's not like this is a one-size-fits-all, but you've got to figure out what are those key things in your life that you need to manage for greater effectiveness. Peter Drucker used to say this, that no time in the history of the world have people been, have we relied on people to manage for people as much as now, to rely on people to manage themselves, and no people have been so ill-equipped to do it. And that really creates kind of the gap that I'm trying to address in our time here. But that's all I can say today, because they're telling me here that I'm finished in this session. So you probably have already left your computer station, having checked in all the hours. But if you're still there, have fun. I'll see you at the next session.